happy Friday, everyone. Today's workshop is going to be all about insurance, and it's a really hot topic. We had about 60 people register to attend, so we're going to let folks join as we get started. But because it's such a hot topic, we only have about 30 minutes for the Q&A, so we're just getting started right on the clock. This workshop is going to be recorded and available on our YouTube later. And then I ask that you please remain on mute during the presentation, but feel free to drop questions in the chat throughout the presentation, and I'll get to that during our Q&A session. And then also during the Q&A session, you can use your raise your hand feature, and we'll get to your questions. For those of you who are new, this workshop is tailored to support communities along the Firewise USA program. Firewise USA is a national program that's run by the NFPA, and it provides a framework for communities in fire-prone areas to rally around their fire concerns and take action to reduce their risk. We at the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council don't run the program, but we are a nonprofit that is providing resources and a bit of local guidance to help you along the way. And then we host these monthly workshops on the third Friday of every month at 1 p.m. So if you'd like to learn more, I highly recommend that you visit venturafiresafe.org. That's our website, and watch our first workshop that introduced the Firewise USA program. A bit of introductions. So these are all the folks that are on the call today and will be speaking. So first is myself. My name is Natasha Saxena. I am the Regional Firewise Coordinator, and I've worked with the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council for about 2 years now. We also have on the call with us Stephen Watson, our Executive Director, Larry Williams, our representative from the Fire Department, and Joel Lauscher, who we're so happy to have today. He's going to be our guest speaker talking about insurance from the nonprofit organization United Policyholders. So our agenda for today is our April workshop. So we're going to have a quick message from our Executive Director, and then a quick introduction from our Ventura County Fire Department representative, Larry Williams. Then we're going to go through very quickly Firewise USA tips for the folks that are here for Firewise. And then I'm going to pass it on to Joel Lauscher. He's going to give a 15-minute presentation. We're going to go for a 5-minute break, get some water, some snacks because it's lunchtime. And then we're going to go through an insurance Q&A. And then we're going to cut it off at 2, maybe a few minutes afterwards. We may not get to everyone's questions, and if you do have questions at the end, please email it to me, natasha@venturafiresafe.org. I'll make sure to compile all those questions and send it off to Joel probably by next week. So that's probably going to be my cutoff for then. And then if you have any more Firewise questions, you can also email that to me, and I'll try to follow up via email. All right, I'll pass it off to Stephen, who has a couple messages for everyone on the call today.
Well, thanks so much, Natasha, for setting this up in the intro. I was told I only have a couple minutes for this just because of the jam-packed schedule, and Larry Williams is going to keep me on time. And Ben and Nancy, I see you in the audience there. You're also going to have to shout at me if I go on for too long. So as Natasha said, I'm the Executive Director at Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council. I've interacted with many of you before. This is my first time having the chance to be on one of these workshops. And I just wanted to say a few words about how exciting and encouraging this is to see so many people and so many communities interested in this program. I know people are still coming in periodically. There were, as Natasha said, about 60 people signed up for this workshop, which is huge for us. And I want to tell a little story really quickly about where we've been and where we are and where we're going. And I remember just over a year ago, we had this idea of, actually Max at our organization had this idea saying, Firewise is big, we got to start looking into it. And I know Larry started to get on board and really wanting to push the Firewise efforts. And in that time, it's just blown up. And so we know this is the right way to go. We've seen so much interest, so much engagement. And a lot of that is thanks to all of you who are on this call and all the work that everyone's doing. And we're kind of a small little nonprofit here, trying to do the best we can with the resources we have. And back when we first started, we had 2-3 communities. We were overjoyed to be working with just these couple communities. We'd spend a lot more time and effort and energy with these because we could. Now we've got 30 plus. I know Larry and Natasha have this tracking sheet. I think it was 39 the last time I saw, of communities that we're interacting with regularly. And so because of that, I just want to ask for your patience. We have a small staff and it may take some time to get to everyone. And essentially just looking back and seeing big picture of this whole program, it's a community-led effort. VRFSC is here to support, but at the end of the day, it's resident-driven, community-driven, and we can only do so much on our end, but we want to do the best we can on our part. We've even had some communities who've gone through the whole process without even much input from us or Larry at this point. So I think in the spirit of it, do your best shot, try to work on it together, band together as a board, go through the process, and lean on us when you need to. And we'll be happy to help in the way that we can. But know that if you reach out to Natasha and you don't hear from her within 10 minutes, it's not because she's ignoring you. She may take a day or two or a week just because she's getting a huge influx of emails. So just ask for your patience on that. And we're doing the best we can over here. And the last thing, I'll groan and groan about nonprofit, not enough funding, not enough capacity, but we are growing. And we have a new programs manager whose face you'll be seeing at the next workshop and probably in the future frequently. So we're getting the help we need to be able to help all the community members as well. Yeah, I'm sure I'm forgetting a few things, but I know I've rambled on a bit too much at this point. But thank you all for your participation, for your efforts. You're really making the shift and the change in the community and in Ventura County that's genuinely making a difference. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen. That was great. And then I'm also going to have Larry introduce himself as well for the program. So Larry, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Larry Williams. I'm the Fire Prevention Supervisor of our Fire Hazard Reduction Program / Community Wildfire Preparedness Unit here for Ventura County Fire Department. Keep in mind that the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council covers a large area, including a couple cities that we don't cover. We do not cover Ventura City, Oxnard, or Fillmore. They have their own fire departments, but everywhere else, you're part of our district. So we're your fire department. We're here to help support you. As Stephen had mentioned, this time last year, we had 2 actually recognized Firewise communities. In July, we got 2 more, the Onalondo and the one in Los Robles in Thousand Oaks, which was a huge for us. That was a double. And soon after that, we got 2 more in the work going on. We hosted a workshop back in August. It's on our website that you can see it. It introduces the whole program too. And now, as of this morning, we got number 11 approved. We got 3 in the Oak Park area. The rest are all in the Ventura County area. And I know Maria is on here, but one exciting thing, and the press release should be going out. I thought it has already, but I know you got Ventura Regional posts on their website, so I'll speak to it. Is we had the King Crest Ridge community in Thousand Oaks received the distinction and selection as the 800th Firewise community in the state of California. We had 700 at this time last year. That's how big it's grown in California. So they're going to be having a recognition event where the state's coming out, NFPA's coming out, and it's a good thing because it's not about the fire department. It's not about the Fire Safe Council. It's about the community, and the community's coming together both internally with their neighbor, and then to the additional communities and support to help it work. Like he said, it's the grassroots, it's the people there. We're just here to help support you. We're running into our busy season with the notices that just got mailed today about clearing your brush and your fire hazards. So staffing's tight for us too. So we'll do what we can. We gave it a good kickstart, and we want to see this continue to grow. So thank you and welcome, and let's get on with the program.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Stephen. Those are really good, encouraging words. And I'm so happy to see all of the amazing communities that are participating in the program. So that being said, I have a 6 quick tips for our Firewise folks on the call, and then I'll pass it on to Joel as soon as possible. So our first tip is the annual investment in vegetation removal can be tricky. We recognize that. Keep on it regularly throughout the year so that you can make year-end tracking a lot easier on yourself. Past year's investment should not be included in this. And then the deadlines to submit your annual investment and vegetation removal are in November each year. I'm not sure about the exact date, but they'll notify you. And then you can use the drop-down menu in your renewal application to jump to the sections that you want to use. Your online portal states the renewal years for your 3-year action plan and your 5-year risk assessment. Those those don't need to be updated every single year. Only the annual investment and vegetation removal need to be updated. And then don't submit until you're completely ready. I highly recommend that you use your resources of us and then the folks at the Ventura County Fire Department to review your application before you send it out, just because it takes the NFPA about 2 to 6 weeks to respond, and then rejections can make that process longer. We also are very well informed about the risks to the community, so we can help you make your risk assessment a bit more detailed. And then don't be discouraged if you get rejected. The NFP and CAL FIRE and us, we all want you to succeed. We're all looking for incremental progress for each community. You don't have to have 100% compliance within 3 years. This is progress, not perfection here. And if you do get rejected, you're going to get some comments on how you can improve the application. It's just a suggestion to improve your application so that you can be successful. And then utilize our website. We've updated our website. We have an FAQ section. In that FAQ section, there is a little note on how other communities have gone about tracking their investment and vegetation removal, which could be really helpful for your community. We also have sample documents of communities in good standing, and then you can find the recordings, including this workshop, on our website. Alrighty, so now I'm going to introduce Joel and pass it on to him. Joel has worked for United Policyholders. He's now working for United Policyholders after working 35 years with the California Department of Insurance and 5 years as a commercial insurance underwriter. So Joel, just give me a second. I'm going to stop sharing screen here and share your presentation. Let's see. Alrighty, you can take the floor, Joel.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. Sounds like we're ready to go. Thank you for having me, and for those in attendance, thanks for your attention. And also thank you for any mitigation efforts you do. Anything you, of course, do for your home is actually a gift to your neighbor because it helps mitigate their chance of loss as well. So it really is benefits everybody. You know, each effort benefits well beyond the individual's home. I'm going to talk about insurance here. That's my particular specialty. And I think we're probably all aware by this point that insurance is a major concern for a lot of people, both keeping their coverage and being able to afford their coverage. So next slide, please, Natasha. I'm going to try and hustle through these slides to give us more time for question and answer at the end. I'll just mention briefly, United Policyholders were a nonprofit, been around since the tunnel fire in Oakland, helping people, typically focusing on claims issues after major catastrophe events, and has gone from Oakland to be an organization that works countrywide, and generally a lot of helping people through the rebuilding process and how that kind of plays out with your insurance coverages. Next slide, please. So today, though, claims are still a focus, but now we're talking more about the availability and the affordability of insurance coverage, something that most of us really took for granted over the many decades and now has become a major concern for a lot of communities. Next slide, please. So there are some homes that still readily can get fire coverage. If you can manage to kind of do this for your home, have a nice 500-foot perimeter of water around it, then you probably don't have any insurance issues with fire coverage. If you're not able to do that, well, you probably want to continue watching. Next slide, please. So one thing, while we do talk about availability and affordability of coverage, we also still want to send the message out that don't compromise your coverage so much that you are significantly underinsured. I will say that just a couple of years ago, I looked at my own fire policy. I live in the Bay Area, and your insurer sends you an estimate of replacement cost. By law, they send that to you every couple of years. It usually looks like they've really thought out and figured out what the value or the cost to rebuild is in your area. But almost 100% of the time, we find that those estimates fall short. My own home, it would have come to about $250 a square foot to rebuild my 1960s tract style home, I would admit, but it probably would cost a lot closer to $400 or more a square foot to actually rebuild my home, given current costs. So take a look at your limits and at least get an idea of what it would cost to rebuild in the area you live in. California is a very expensive place to rebuild, and make sure you're at least in the range of reasonable with your limits to carry on your homeowner's policy. I know it's hard to tell people to raise their limits at a time they're worried about having coverage at all, but those limits are there for a purpose. And having been to so many post-catastrophe events, everybody wishes they had more coverage, after the loss. But so at least get yourself somewhere where you understand what you should have and get, somewhere in that ballpark at the very least. Next slide, please. So another thing we always suggest is the inventory of your personal property. That can be done in a very painstaking way, writing down everything you purchased, when you bought it, what condition it's in, and what you paid for it, which is what an insurer can demand of you if you want to get reimbursed for your contents after a loss. They don't always do that, and one way to get them to kind of make it easier on you, and a great way to have at least some information about what is in your home, is to walk through your home and on your phone, simply video, all the things you have, video, through your rooms, your furnishings and such. But more importantly, the things you might forget, which are the things inside your cupboards, in your closets, the drawers of your dressers and such, so that you have evidence of, this is what I owned. And it makes any claim that hopefully you'll never need to make, but it would make that process a lot easier. And, it's certainly an easier thing to do than doing that more detailed inventory, but at least you would have something. Next slide, please. So an issue for many folks today, of course, non-renewal. And it's happening in pretty much every county throughout the state of California. In California, you have to get 70 days notice. And so you should take that opportunity to both appeal the non-renewal notice if you think the non-renewal is for a reason that is incorrect, it doesn't apply to your home. But also that also means you need to start shopping for replacement coverage right away. So even if you do think you have a valid reason to get reinstated or get that non-renewal reversed, still start the shopping process. You probably know if you're watching this video later, that the reason for it is you want to find out what's going on in the insurance world. And there are very few insurers writing new business. A lot of people are ending up in the FAIR plan. So you want to do all you can to avoid being in the FAIR plan. So also, I would suggest reassess your property and determine whether there are some steps you can take that would reduce the risk, and take all those actions as well. You're in Firewise and fire safe communities tend to be the people who already have taken these actions. But again, whatever you put off, try to put the best face on your home for an insurance company by correcting any areas or conditions about your home that would lead to an insurer questioning whether to offer you coverage. So next slide, please. So a couple shopping tools available if you end up in this situation, non-renewal. You just saw one from United Policyholders dropped by your insurer. There's also a set of information available from the California Department of Insurance, including a top 10 tips of finding coverage. I would say one of the top 10 that's on there is a link to the 800 number for every admitted insurer that writes residential coverage in California. You know, you may think, well, there's only about a dozen companies that offer coverage, and my agent said he or she tried them all and couldn't place my home with them, so they're offering to put me in the FAIR plan. Please don't give up that easily. You know, ultimately, yes, you might end up in the FAIR plan, but at least shop with multiple agents, or possibly even call up each of those 800 numbers, listing they're like 80, 90 homeowners insurers that write business in the California admitted market. Call them, ask if they would offer you coverage, or those that don't write directly, ask them to refer you to the closest agent that represents them, and then contact that agent and see if they can place you with that insurer. So again, it's not 5 or 6 companies that are offering coverage. Many more offer them. A lot of them aren't. And in fact, just the news was that Tokyo Marine was going to leave California. Well, that's bad news, but it also is probably a company most people have never heard of. Well, there are still many other companies on that list that nobody's ever heard of that are still writing coverage. So, you know, again, shop around. Don't be discouraged by the first few no's or, you know, turn downs that you receive. Keep going till you've exhausted the list. And at that point, you know, if you have to end up with a FAIR plan, at least you know you put up a fight. Next slide, please. So the FAIR plan is what they call the insurer of last resort. It is available for almost any home in California, would qualify for the coverage there. It's quite expensive, even though it is very much a bare bones policy. Pretty much the main peril is fire. It does not include things like water damage or liability. Water damage is typically the second most common claim that people have. Liability doesn't happen, you know, liability issues like somebody trip and fall on your property typically doesn't happen very often, but if it does, it can be very expensive. So you're going to want those coverages. So that means you'd have to also purchase a difference in conditions policy, or a DIC, sometimes referred to. Those are offered by many insurers, and they're willing to sell those to complement or, you know, pair up with a FAIR plan policy. So it's, you know, an expensive proposition to have those two coverages, but you're still going to want full coverage. That's what you need to do. I would say if, you know, you get your kind of a second wind, even if you have placed your coverage in the FAIR plan, take another go at searching for coverage every few months to see if you can find a carrier. Maybe, you know, somebody that said no before has lost some business and is willing to write again in the region where you live. So don't just settle permanently for a FAIR plan policy. You want to stay out of the FAIR plan if you can. I have also seen people say, well, the FAIR plan doesn't have that much in reserves, and if there's a fire, they're going to run out of money. The FAIR plan is able to assess all the insurers in the admitted market who write homeowners coverage, and they all contribute to the FAIR plan surplus or ability to pay claims proportionate to their share of the market. So the FAIR plan is well funded. Don't worry about that, but just try to avoid being there if you can. Next slide, please. So again, check out our information at United Policyholders. Again, we have information here is kind of showing pairing that FAIR plan dwelling fire policy with the difference in conditions policy to equal something more like the homeowner's policy that you previously would have had. Next slide, please. So some of the things on the FAIR plan, just quickly, that aren't automatically built in, but you can add, are replacement cost coverage, fair rental value, code upgrades coverage, a thing regularly built into a homeowner's policy, debris removal coverage. Again, you need to add that in. It's built into a standard homeowner's policy, but not a FAIR plan policy. And you may need to increase your other structures coverage. Next slide, please. And I will say that the FAIR plan, like most of the market today, does offer discounts now for mitigation actions at your home. So, those things you're doing as part of being a Firewise community can also benefit you in the FAIR plan. Next slide, please. So I'm going to mention quickly some things about how insurance rates and underwriting or risk selection work. For the last decade or so, insurers have used satellite imagery of wildfire risk models to assign scores to homes. And the more urban kind of level property with ready access to fire departments generally has the lower score. That would be in this little chart from the Ventura area, the one closer to the shoreline in the Ventura city area. As you get further up that hill to more vegetation or more slope, score goes up, as does your premium, and your eligibility for coverage goes down. So that's been happening, for many years. That issue has accelerated in the last couple of years due to some of the increasing numbers of wildfires that we have suffered. Next slide, please. And I will add that from that satellite imagery approach, insurers have moved on to some models that provide a lot more, I'll call it, granular detail about the homes they are looking for. And that's a result of using aerial imagery compared to satellite imagery. Now they're able to look at your home, determine, such as in the case of this home, whether tree branches extend over your roof, whether you have a defendable space. And in addition to those components, they build in some of the details about your home, such as the year built, which tells them some of the things about like what type of vents would have been in place in the building code at the time your home was built. So for example, if they're using one of these models, which many do, and you have an older home and you have upgraded those vents to newer ember resistant vents, you're going to want to tell your insurer that, because the insurer may not be aware of that. You really want to report to your insurer any mitigation actions you have taken at your home that they may not have recorded. But anyway, this is a sense of how detailed the perspective is getting of your home without the insurer even needing to show up in person for an inspection. Next slide, please. So just to get an idea of how rates play out as well, you may have heard not too long ago, State Farm got an approval for a 20% overall rate increase. So that was well beyond the average that the department typically approves, especially for some of these larger carriers, where consumer groups sometimes come in and intercede in the process and debate whether the rate increase the company has requested is supported. In this case, it was agreed that this increase was supported, but it's good to know, or it can maybe help to understand that 20% is an overall increase for the statewide book of business written by State Farm. And it plays out differently for every zip code and every home. And so looking at the rate filing that State Farm submitted, I looked at the impacts for some of the zip codes in the Ventura area. And you can see, for example, for Ventura 93003, that 20% increase statewide was actually a 25% increase on average in that zip code. But that again is an average, right? So there may be some people in Ventura that only got a 10% increase and others that got a 35% increase or more. But you can kind of get a sense of how some of these zip codes are more or less impacted overall, you know, than the average. You can see Santa Paula, the community, 29%, so a little more. Then you go to Oakview, and you can see that it was a very significant increase, as if 25% wasn't enough. 54% on average in Oakview. Now, you know, that could be that someone, you know, there are fewer homes insured there, certainly than in Ventura. And it could be that just a very few homes are getting 100% increases, while others get 20% increases, but still on average, very impacted. Thousand Oaks, on the other hand, on average, was a little less than State Farm's 20%. So, you know, it plays out differently. So when you hear some number in the press, understand that, well, that's just an average, and it can play out very differently for your home. Again, all of these that I'm showing by zip code are also averages. Some people may have a greater impact on their home, some less. But so just, you know, don't assume that, well, okay, we're all gonna, you know, end up with a 20% increase. And some of the people that are ending up with the lower number than the average of their zip codes are the ones that are doing the mitigation work, right? It's those discounts that are bringing a lot of these people below the average for their community. Next slide, please. So again, I'm just going to reiterate, you know, still try to maintain the right coverage. We reiterate this again because so many people are trying to, you know, really economize on their insurance. You still want to have the right rebuild limits and understand for certain things, there are limitations on your coverage, like art and jewelry or business property. If you want to look at what the sublimits are in your homeowner's policy, and you may need to expand your coverage on certain of those specialty items. And you know, the typical homeowner's policy does not cover flood, earthquake, mold, or earth movement, right? Those are typically additional coverages you would have to buy separately. Next slide, please. So to save money, which is the key, without compromising your coverage limits, you want to find out about all the discounts an insurer makes available. So of course you want to find out about those mitigation discounts, but there may be others that they have. One thing we always say is raise your deductible. So if you've been with the same insurer many years, you might have put a $500 deductible in place at a time when $500 seemed like a lot of money. And you still have that $500 deductible today. You want to increase that to $5,000 or $10,000, whatever kind of loss you can reasonably absorb yourself. You really don't want to use your homeowner's insurance to make small claims for losses you have. You want to kind of keep that for any big loss. So you might as well save the premium that you're paying for having a very low deductible and have as big a deductible as you can reasonably, again, are able to absorb, you know, if you had a loss. Next slide, please. You know, there is the set of mitigation discounts that was pushed out by the state a year ago from the state's own Safer from Wildfire set of recommendations. And of course, fire risk reduction community, and more applicable here, Firewise USA sites in good standings are the two community level designations. Next slide, please. But there are several also property level actions you should take. Class A roof is luckily one that almost everyone has already done, but enclosed eaves and fire resistant vents, multi-pane windows, and this clearance space from the ground to the siding of your home are also key. Next slide, please. And then there's a set, of course, of property level mitigations that also will result in discounts. Next slide, please. I won't go into them because I expect most of you have heard about them. So again, please, I'd ask that everybody here go onto ubhealth.org's website and take the California Home Survey so that we kind of get an idea of what's happening in your community, get information that helps us make appeals for legislation or where to focus our activities. So thank you if you go on and take our survey, please. Next slide, please. And again, our website has a lot of resources that you might take a look at to focus your efforts. Basically, these are the things that insurers are looking for. Here you see, an ember-resistant vent, the perimeter clearance around the property, hardscaping, not having a wooden fence connect to your home. Something that I am still guilty of, despite the mitigation actions I've taken. I have that wooden gate on either side of my home that I need to address. Hopefully I will get to that soon. Next slide, please. And we do have county by county information. This one just happens to show Santa Cruz County, but there's one for Ventura County and Santa Clara County and every county in the state. Next slide, please. And we also have information from Listos, California, a state government provider of really valuable information as well. Next slide, please. So remember, we're here to help. We're going to try to do that by answering some questions today and hopefully, again, referring to some of the information in this presentation can be helpful to you as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joel. And we really appreciate all the wealth of information that you have. Since we get so many calls on insurance, and since we're wildfire education, we're not always so sure about insurance. So it's great to have you here. For those of you who are registered, I'm going to be sharing Joel's presentation with everyone afterwards. And we're a little bit over schedule, but we're still going to go for that 5-minute break. And then we'll go to the questions on the chat. And then we'll have some live questions. Joel said he'll stay a few minutes afterwards, so hopefully we can get through all those questions. But again, if we can't get through all of them, please email me and I'll compile them for Joel to respond to you. All right, so see you after the break, 1:45. All right. So it is 1:45 and we're going to be returning for our Q&A session. Before we start that, I just have 2 items for you. One is I've just dropped the link to an exit survey, which will ask you what you'd like to see next. It's just 3 questions, and that's really how we got Joel here today, because at the last workshop, everyone said they wanted to hear from insurance. So it's really helpful for me to know what you'd like to see. Second is we have a little message from our executive director again. So Stephen, do you want to take the floor?
Sure, I just can't help steal the spotlight sometimes, but Joel, thanks for the presentation and for offering to answer some questions after this. I wanted to briefly say, which I meant to say before, is thanks to our funders as well, because we are a nonprofit. We wouldn't be able to do this kind of work without them. CAL FIRE is a big funder for our Firewise efforts, and Edison International through Ventura County Community Foundation. I also recognize a handful of donors in the chat too and part of this presentation. So really appreciate that a lot. As a 501c3, the grants are great. Sometimes they're not enough. We've got 6 people in a 607 square foot office. We need some help. So anything you guys can do is really helpful. And nobody likes asking for money. If you are one of those people, let me know, because there may be a spot on our board for you, but just had to put that out there. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, so I'm going to get to the chat, and then we can hopefully go to a raise your hand feature where people can answer different questions. So first item on the chat is from Robert Riles. I received conflicting information. Farmers indicates nothing will help based on our fire line score. State Farm indicated using the Firewise initiative for fire protection with your home or community will make a difference. Why the conflicting information? What do I say to my board? They have abandoned Firewise. It's a really difficult situation there. I think I'll say a tiny bit on it before you go to it, Joel, and then I'll pass it on to you. For the conflicting information on Firewise, I'm just going to say that for Firewise, you could potentially get a 5 to 10% discount on your insurance, but it's highly dependent on your insurance. So we always say to ask for individuals to reach out to their insurance agency and see if that discount applies. And it's not a guarantee. So I know it's a really confusing information out there. So I definitely empathize with your situation, Robert. And it's also very hard to get community engagement for Firewise, but keep going on the effort. And sometimes you might have to find Firewise is not a program for every community. So sometimes you may have to do some more individual efforts. I'll pass it off to you, Joel, if you have anything to say.
Yeah, I'll just say kind of hard sometimes for folks to understand how some of these things work, but Fireline or CoreLogic or which is a Verisk tool, or Zesty, are entities that score properties. So any one of these, and so Fireline, one mentioned, gives properties a score based on certain attributes of that property. No matter where in the state the property happens to be located, it would be given a score that's based on the brush in the vicinity of the home and the slope that the home's situated on. So that type of information and distance sometimes for access to firefighting assistance. So each home is scored. Those scores lead to both whether you're eligible or ineligible for coverage, and also on the rating plan, whether you pay more or you pay less. So, each insurer's eligibility standards do involve those one of those models outputs to talk about their wildfire risk. And every insurer now has to give a discount for community, like Firewise discounts, but Firewise is not a eligibility standard necessarily with an insurer. If they do write you, they have to give you a discount if you belong, but they don't have to write you at all if you're not within the risk score that they're willing to offer coverage to. And so, they're two different things. And unfortunately, you can do all the mitigation action you want, but not qualify for coverage at an insurer, even though if you did qualify, you get discounts there. So just one of the conflicting things and how things play out.
Joel, so you work into my second series of questions that I sent in. How do I find my community's Fireline score? By zip code? By insurer? How do I find out what it's scored at? Because one of the board members said it was scored such that our insurers would not give necessarily a discount, or they may not insure us, or the renewal may be difficult. How do I find out how our community or a household has a Fireline score? Where do I get that information? Two, how you already described how that Fireline score is determined by slope, location, access by a fire department. So I understand that. What organization determines it? That's what I'm curious about.
Okay, Fireline is a product of an entity that this is one of their products that they sell to insurers, this service. The score only applies to each individual home. So you could have a neighbor next door or 10 doors down that has a totally different score, depending on where the break point is in terms of distance from the firefighting service, or how much the slope has progressed going uphill or downhill to that home. It is not public information, to my knowledge, made available broadly to the public. It is something insurers purchase for a price from the vendor to help them determine one way to measure risk of their homes.
So I could not go to my insurer and say, can you tell me what the fire line score is for my home? They would not be able, they would not tell me that.
They could tell you that. I mean, most insurers could give you your score. Generally speaking, I think many insurers would tell you a score. It just doesn't tell you necessarily how it arrived at that score.
Well, I had my insurer come out and we did a videotape with them of my whole household, the yards and so on. And they sent my renewed policy to me with very little increase. So I'm going to assume from that I'm in pretty good shape for my fire line score and the fire protection I've taken around my home. So thank you for your time. Thank you so much for your time.
Certainly.
Thank you for your question, Robert. So moving on in the chat, we have some good news. Someone, Steve J. Knoll, got a non-renewal notice at first a couple weeks ago, then got their homeowners insurance with guaranteed replacement coverage from AAA yesterday, and for 45% of what they were paying before. So congratulations, that's always nice to hear some good news. Linda Cannon says, how up to date is the California Department of Insurance tips updated and kept current and accurate?
Yeah, so one of the things I referred to was the 800 numbers of every insurer that does business on an admitted basis in California. I would bet that the phone numbers for State Farm or Tokyo Marine or whatever are still on that list. So I would guess that some of the information is not completely up to date, but you know, I don't think it takes, and it is a major effort to call the 800 number of every insurer. But if you are in that position where your only alternative, it appears, is the FAIR plan, you know, again, I'm just saying it's worth the time to make those phone calls to find out. You might find a few of them say, well, you know, we're not, well, you might find a lot of them may say, we're not writing in your area, or we're not writing new business, or your home wouldn't qualify. You know, you're going to get a lot of negative responses. But, you know, if you landed on one, like somebody in the chat did, found another carrier, then it's certainly worth the effort. You know, this is new coverage is probably, you know, it's an expensive proposition right now. So it's one of those things that's kind of like, that's worth the effort to try to see if you do better, even though I know it's going to lead you down a lot of dead end paths. And I'm sorry that that's kind of the way it is right now.
Awesome. And then moving on to Chuck DeVito, also is another case, non-renewed by farmers last year and then went to Mercury. Then Linda Cannon asks, how serious is the need to maintain any kind of coverage at all costs? Is it okay for it to lapse? Is it okay to let it lapse for a year or two?
So first, if you have a mortgage, your lender will not allow you to continue without having fire coverage on your home. And that at a bare minimum is something like the FAIR plan policy, right? At least a fire coverage. If you don't buy coverage, the lender places coverage, it will be added to your mortgage payments, and it would be a very, you know, wouldn't be enough to rebuild necessarily. It's only enough to protect the lender's stake in your home. But for almost anyone, you know, if your home had a total loss, that would be a catastrophic event for your finances. And so, you know, the odds, of course, of any given home burning down in any given 1 year or 2 year period are very extremely limited, but it is a massive risk to take with, for most people, their most valuable possession. So, you know, I certainly would try my best to discourage anyone from going without, at the very least, fire coverage for their home.
Thank you, Joel. Hope Rectoric asks, would Joel be able to provide his contact information? So for that question, I'd say what we're going to be doing is anyone can email me with your questions, and then I'll probably do a cutoff by the end of next week. And I'm just going to compile all those questions in an email to Joel so that he can respond back to you. He's doing a lot of these workshops all across the nation. So to make it easier on him, we're going to go that route. And I'm going to drop my email in the chat right now for everyone. Hopefully you can see that. Alrighty. Is it true that Linda Cannon asks, is it true that you get umbrella liability policies if you not have carried normal coverage?
Okay. Well, I would say in the usual, definition of umbrella coverage is typically meaning a liability policy. So, and it is a liability policy that is beyond the liability policy that's written on a primary basis. So, for example, homeowners coverage has liability coverage built in. And that would, if there was a trip and fall on your property, or somebody got hurt, at your birthday party that got out of hand, or whatever, and sued you for bodily injury or some property damage, that liability coverage from your homeowner's policy would respond. And if it went over your limit and you'd purchase an umbrella policy, that's typically what an umbrella policy is. A coverage beyond your liability limits for your primary coverage. You generally can't buy an umbrella policy unless you have the underlying first response type liability coverage. So I don't know if that answers your question. Neither one, of course, covers any damage to your own home, right? They're just extend to your liability for damage or injury that you're responsible for to the property of others or body of others.
And another question is, does UP provide a list of local recommended agents they feel are better than most?
I think we might have, probably if you dig around, some agents that have contributed information or such on our site, but I don't think there is a set of recommended agents. We usually suggest that you try to ask that question of people in your community, your neighbors, people on Nextdoor, calling whoever your local agents are, but understand that, you might have to reach out further because, some towns may only have a State Farm and a farmer's agent, neither of whom may be writing new coverage in your community. And you're going to want to contact multiple independent agents because that's how many of the lesser known insurers operate. And even, some larger insurers. You may have heard of Travelers Insurance, for example. You'd have to find an independent agent that actually represents Travelers to get a Travelers quote. Any given independent agent typically only works for 6 or 8 or 10 insurers at most. So to kind of canvass the whole market, you generally have to contact many independent agents to make sure you've found out an answer from every company. So when you contact an agent, you want to understand who they represent and who they've tried to place your coverage with, so you make sure you've covered that entire list of insurers writing homeowners business in California that's on that top 10 list.
And then Maria asks, is there a way to question my insurer, State Farm, how they've evaluated increases for my zip code and particular house? I think we kind of answered that, but maybe we can add to that. What I know is that you're able to request a risk score from all of your insurances to see how they've scored your home. But Joel, you can go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, any single home is the premium that you pay is a composite of several considerations. The zip code is one, that's part of a territory that may include multiple zip codes, but there's going to be things like the age of your home. Sometimes it's about when your plumbing was last replaced. It's going to be about your fire protection class of your local fire department. That could be as low as a score of 1 or 2, which are the best, most fully equipped fire departments, up to a 10, which basically means you don't have really a fire department that responds. So that plays a big role. Your type of roof plays into your premium. So, just knowing the zip code or any one thing is just one component, as is your wildfire risk score. That's just one component of all of these others, one multiplied by the other to come to a final premium for any individual homeowner. That's why, somebody 3 doors down from your home might have a totally different premium from that same insurer because of their type of roof or the age of their home, or because they've done some of the mitigation actions, or because their plumbing is newer, or they have, different kind of windows or, structure. It's all a consideration of all the rating factors the insurer uses in its particular rating plan.
And then David Fleming asks, a post appeared in Nextdoor about a homeowner being canceled by Farmers Insurance after 30 years. I would like to know if anyone has heard of this organization that farmers required the owner to obtain a certificate in order to get a quote, wildfireprepared.org. If anyone's interested in the IBHS program, that's answered in the chat. Thank you, Stephen, for answering that. So I'm just going to direct folks to the chat to answer that one. And I'm going to move on to the next question, unless if you'd like to add to that.
No, I'd just say IBHS is a pretty commonly used consideration for insurers in terms of mitigation actions.
All right. Barbara says, my son has a large tree near his neighbor's property. The neighbor's insurance now will not cover him while the tree is there. My son has offered to pay half the cost for the $8,000 to remove the tree. The neighbor will not chip in. Are you running into these kinds of issues, and how are they resolved?
Yeah, your home is looked at as an exposure, not just for your property, but for the neighboring properties immediately neighboring, or within range of impacting your home. That's why you can have a totally mitigated home, with all the landscape pretty much non-conducive to wildfire. But if you have a forest 50 yards away, the insurer still won't write you. So there's no guarantees. Your neighbor's property, if it's heavily vegetated, could impact your score on Firewise, for example, or your risk. If your neighbor's tree were to fall on your home, there might be a cause of action against your neighbor. There may not be if it was a healthy tree that was, well maintained, and it was just, an unfortunate event. Then your own insurer would have to respond to pay the damages. So, all of our trees impact not only our own home, but the risk of the home next door. And that's just kind of how it works. You really would have to work with your neighbor, if you offer to pay for half the cost to remove the tree, that's great. But the neighbor may want to keep the tree, of course. So that is, up to the neighbor, and it may or may not impact your insurance. Often it doesn't, but sometimes it does.
Thank you, Joel. And then I've also updated the link to the exit survey on the chat. You'll see there's an updated link in reply because it was locked earlier. Sorry about that. But I'll flag that one of the options that I could, as a future guest speaker, could be IBHS to inform you all more about that certification for your insurance. Maria asks, would I find different rates from different agents at the same insurer?
No, you shouldn't. A property, if an agent provides a complete application to that insurer, then the insurer would play out each of those rating components I just spoke about to come up with a final premium for your insured. So if the agent kind of gave a ballpark figure, maybe there'd be a difference, but no, there's only one premium outcome with any one insurer that is provided with the full information in an application. So if an agent did forget to write down that you're in a Firewise community, or that you've done some mitigation work that is part of that list of mandatory discounts, yes, you could get a different quote. But if they gave full information to, the insurer, there's only, there is one final result that is the accurate result.
Leslie asks, if one is going to be non-renewed, is there a required time frame you must be notified by?
If you're going to be non-renewed, yeah, I think it's 70 days notice. In the updated laws in California, it's actually one of the most generous or longest notice periods that homeowners receive in the nation.
And then Hope asks, would you be able to speak for a local homeowners association community meeting? I wanted to just hear what you'd have to say to that, I guess. I think
do we do
Um,
these presentations to homeowners associations?
mhm.
Yes, we do. Zoom makes it easier. Sometimes, for large groups, we also appear in person if they are nearby one of our staff's homes. But yeah, we speak for all types of entities. Firewise communities happen to be one of the most interested, and we're happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And Hope, if you do want to get connected to Joel, you can just reach out to me and I'll forward that to Joel. It looks like any other questions were answered in the chat. Stephen or Larry replied, so hopefully you all can read that. Joel, I think that if anybody has any last questions, just use the raise your hand feature, just in case.
And I will mention that we talked about IBHS, Institute for Building and Home Safety, has a set of mitigation actions. They're very similar to the Safer from Wildfire set of mitigations that some state agencies came up with, and are the baseline for mandatory discounts for homeowners insurers. So, kind of take a look at both of those, but certainly don't ignore the Safer from Wildfire ones, because there are a couple differences. One there is for enclosed eaves. If you have enclosed eaves, there's a discount that insurers have to offer. That's not a consideration for the IBHS list.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joel.
Okay, thank you for having me, and to the best of your community, thank you for your interest, and best of luck out there. It's a really challenging homeowners insurance market and expensive, and you just have to kind of know that that's what you're going to be dealing with. If you have any questions, I'll welcome them through Natasha. So thank you, Natasha, for the invitation.
Thank you, Joel. We really appreciated it. Stephen, Larry, does anybody else have anything to say before we end the meeting for all?
This is Larry. Sorry, I was muted out there for a while. I had a phone call I had to take. I was just glancing through the chat, and I think there was a reference or a question to about VCFD, so I'm not sure if that got answered or not.
Not sure if I saw anything.
That may have been a direct message to you as well, Larry. Just
Very
double check.
possible. Alrighty. And then the IBHS link, Larry dropped the link for learning more about that program. I wanted to say that the IBHS program can be very strict. So if they have like a list of all the things that you must do in order to get that certification, you really have to do everything on that list in order to get that certification. And again, I'm happy to invite someone from IBHS to speak at a future Firewise presentation. Other than that, I think I'm going to end the meeting for all now. Thank you all so much for coming to these workshops. It's lovely to see some recurring faces, and you can reach out to me anytime. All right. Thank you. Have a great, happy Friday. Have a great Friday.
Thank you, everyone.